This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 17 of season 4 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, April 29th, 1911, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. The week starts with the About Town section. The next meeting of the Fortnightly Club will be held at the Wright Schoolhouse on Friday evening, May 5th. By invitation of the club, DeLacy Corkum of Billerica and Samuel L. Taylor of Westford will debate the following question. Resolved, that reciprocity with Canada will be of benefit to the New England farmer. Mr. Corkum, in accepting the invitation, writes, I will give you a debate in favor of reciprocity that you have not heard for a quarter of a century. Something doing on that side of the question, surely. The little fellow on the other side admits already that he begins to feel a good deal as Goliath felt after he got a rap on the head from David. Come, everybody, Mr. Corkum's terms are just give me a crowd. The little fellow is, of course, Samuel L. Taylor, who writes the About Town section that we're reading right now. Word has reached town of the death of Frank D. O'Brien in Oregon. About a year ago, his father, John O'Brien, died, and the farm, located on the Tadmuck Road, was sold to Pearlie A. Wright, and the son-in-law, John Good, removed to Oregon. Frank was a quiet young man, liked by everyone, and a veteran of the Spanish-American War. Bright's disease was assigned as the cause of death. He was about 35 years old. Burial was in Oregon. Saturday, Henry O. Keyes, while driving down Stony Brook Road, with many wheeled vehicles following each other by a common bond of rope fastenings in the order hereafter named, a load of hay, a Democrat wagon, a horse hay rake, and a cow. He suddenly collided with the temporary supports at the railroad bridge, which spilled his hay, upset the Democrat, broke the shafts of the hay rake, and choked the cow so she was anxious to know when the breathing was going to begin again. A wide horse rake, a narrow bridge, and a sharp curve are three incompatible come-togethers. A Democrat wagon mentioned here is a light flatbed farm wagon, typically with two seats and usually drawn by a pair of horses. And this is the bridge that was mentioned last week that was undergoing widening and an increase in the distance between the bridge and the road, which I think was done by lowering the road. The Brookside Mill owners are busy installing a new engine and making other repairs, which makes it necessary for the mill pond to recede to the channel of the brook. William R. Taylor has received from the state a number of trout and is preparing to stock several of the trout streams of the town. Mrs. Pearlie Wright is quite seriously ill with appendicitis at her home on the Tadmuck Road. Dr. Wells is in attendance. Reverend Seth Walker, who adds so much to the life of the old Walker homestead when in town, is at present attending a minister's institute in Philadelphia. There are 300 Advent ministers in attendance, and the institute will continue for 3 weeks. Seth Bannister, who has been ill with the grip and other undesirable sensations connected with it, has, with the aid of Dr. Wells, been able to unclasp the grip clench. Grip was the old name for what we call the flu. The next meeting of Middlesex North Pomona Grange will be held at Carlisle on Friday, May 5th. This is under the new departure plan of meeting with the local Grangers instead of having the monthly meeting at Lowell, expecting an increased attendance. Amos Poley has just finished planting his 40th bushel of potatoes. Much inquiry is being asked for Daniel H. Sheehan, who was listed to plant 50 acres of potatoes, but up to date he has to get a catch on the plow. The next paragraph is on, or next section, I guess, is on the bridge, a bridge hearing. The hearing on the proposed alterations on the railroad bridge that spans the Stony Brook Highway was held at the Brookside Station on Monday before the county commissioners. We wouldn't call that a highway, we would call it a road. The petition for a hearing was by the Boston and Maine Railroad and was read by Mr. Gould, chairman of the county commissioners, who called upon the petitioners to state their case. The attorney for the road stated that the bridge was to be rebuilt, that the new bridge would be modern in material and construction, that they desired to widen the abutments for the bridge on the north side enough to double track the road, that they are now running engines that weigh over 100 tons, hence the temporary propping in the way of the present bridge, and the heavier engines necessitates a new and more modern bridge. The confirmation of the need of a new bridge while the commissioners were viewing the premises, a heavy freight train passing over the bridge sagged it quite perceptibly. The heavy trains having settled the temporary supports, so they did not support the bridge. The town was represented by the selectmen to look after its rights. They made no formal remonstrance against the proposed changes involving the highway. In fact, none ought to be made, as it is an unavoidable business proposition. All interested were agreed that the space for the traveled road to the overhead bridge was insufficient, and the problem that perplexes is how to heighten it. The railroad is in the air already, and the highway is in the mud, and there you are with both horns of the dilemma. By law, the final adjustment and award of the cost of the proposed changes will go before a special commission to be appointed by the Supreme Court. Next, we have the Westford Center section. Reverend David Wallace, Mrs. Alice Lambert, Mrs. Lillian and May Atwood, and Mr. and Mrs. Leonard Wheeler attended the spring meeting of the Association of Congregational Churches held with the church in Harvard on Wednesday. Mr. Wallace was one of the speakers of the day, giving an address on the art of hearing. Last Sunday morning at his own church, Mr. Wallace based his sermon on lessons from the wholesome philosophy of Sam Walter Foss, and exemplified in some of the poems of this gentle songwriter. Mr. Wallace attended the Christian Endeavor Convention at Leominster on Patriots' Day, where Dr. Francis E. Clark was one of the speakers of the day. Sam Walter Foss, who was mentioned here, was born on a farm in Candia, New Hampshire, and graduated from Brown University in 1882. He was the librarian at the Somerville Mass Library from 1898 to 1911. He wrote a poem a day for the newspapers, and his collected poems were published in 6 volumes from 1892 to 1907. His poetry was of the frank and homely, quote, common man, end quote, variety. Longtime Detroit Tigers baseball announcer Ernie Harwell, born in 1918 and died in 2010, often referred to one of Foss's poems when a batter took a called third strike. He stood there like the house by the side of the road and watched it go by. I believe the house beside the road by the side of the road was one of his poems. The Westford Academy baseball team was defeated by the Groton High School by the score of 10-5 at the Whitney Park last Saturday afternoon. Perhaps the cold, unseasonable weather of the day and the fact that the Westford team was short 1 or 2 of its best players accounted somewhat for their defeat. At this writing, Dr. Blaney and his bride are still absent on their wedding trip. You may recall that being mentioned the previous week. They were married on April 19, 1911. Mrs. Alice Howard, librarian at Cotuit, has been spending a few days at home with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Calvin Howard. Mr. and Mrs. Pearl Harmon are spending a few weeks at Chelmsford Center, where they have bought land, setting out small fruits, and making other improvements. Later, they plan to build a bungalow. Representative and Mrs. Edward Fisher attended the reception at the State House Monday evening given by Governor Foss to the members of the legislature and officers of the National Guard, and on Wednesday evening were among those present at the dinner of the Judiciary Committee, followed by a theater party. Eugene Noble Foss, born in 1858, died in 1939, a Democrat, served as a representative to Congress from Boston from 1910 to 11 until he was elected 45th governor of Massachusetts and served from 1911 to 1914. Miss Pauline Wallace has been detained from school this week and last, suffering from a seriously threatened case of appendicitis. At this writing, while confined to her bed, she is much more comfortable. Mrs. Leonard Wheeler was an invited guest at the Middlesex Women's Club on Monday and enjoyed Mrs. Marion Craig Wentworth's readings from Maeterlinck's Bluebird. Maurice Polydore Marie Bernard Maeterlinck, also called Count Maeterlinck, was born in 1862 and died in 1949, was a Belgian playwright, poet, and essayist who wrote in French. Perhaps his most well-known play was The Bluebird, published in 1908. It is a story about a girl named Myrtle and her brother named Tytl, Tyl, who seek happiness, represented by the Bluebird of Happiness, with the help of the good fairy Barry Loon. T. Arthur E. Wilson and Miss Augusta E. Blaisdell were united in marriage Tuesday, April 25th. Owing to the serious illness of the bridegroom's mother, the wedding was a very quiet one, the ceremony being performed by Reverend David Wallace at his residence. Mrs. Wilson, the mother-in-law, or the mother of the bridegroom, died on July 6th, about 2.5 months later. One of the pleasant events in preparation is what might be called a sort of dedicatory festival by the school children to show their appreciation of Mrs. Whitney's gift of the park and playground. This will take place May 27th, or possibly not until June 3rd. Plans for the program are somewhat in the preliminary stages, but there will be sports by the academy pupils, baseball and tennis, and drills by the younger children, and it promises to be a memorable affair for children, parents, and friends, and notice of plans will be given as they develop further. Members of the Tadmont Club are reminded of the special business meeting called by the president for next Tuesday afternoon at Library Hall at 3 o'clock. Business of importance consisting of radical changes in the Constitution are to be brought up to be acted upon, and plans are arranged for the annual social. The next paragraph is about the Westford Grange. The Grange meeting of the regular meeting of Westford Grange, Thursday evening of last week, was an occasion of interest to the members with conferring of 3rd and 4th degrees, a supper and annual inspection by one of the state deputies, and guests from other Granges. The work of the 3rd degree was done by the ladies' degree staff most efficiently, with Mrs. Henry B. Reed in the master's chair and Wiley M. Wright as director. The work of the 4th degree was by the regular officers. There were 20 candidates in the class. A bountiful supper was served in the lower hall in charge of J. Henry Colburn. The Honorable Chester Williams of Cochituate Grange was the inspecting deputy and discharged his duties with courteous efficiency. Mr. Williams, who was our Middlesex County Commissioner, came from his home in Cochituate for the evening in his automobile and brought with him Sidney Loker, master of that Grange, and Mrs. Loker, Warren Bishop, lecturer, and Mrs. George Bishop, secretary. There were also patrons present from Groton, Littleton, and Chelmsford. Next, we have the Graniteville section. Carol Furbush of the USS Nebraska battleship is now visiting his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Furbush, for a few days. The many friends of P. Henry Harrington are glad to see him out again after his illness. The Glee Club of Graniteville held a very pleasant dancing party in Ford's Village last Saturday evening that was well attended. The Colonial Orchestra of Lowell furnished excellent music, and at intermission, refreshments were served. The committee in charge of the affair was Miss Catherine Rafferty, Miss Flora Stewart, and Miss Mary Healy. The Graniteville and the National AC Club of Lowell played 6 innings here on last Saturday afternoon, the score standing 18-4 in favor of the home team. Work on the renovating and repairing of St. Catherine's Church is now progressing rapidly, and P. Henry Harrington, contractor, will push this work to completion. The next couple of paragraphs are on forest fires. Several woodland fires in this vicinity caused the forest warden, John A. Healy, and his deputies considerable trouble on Monday. The first fire was along the electric car line near the Forest Road, and after this was got under control, another fire broke out near Whidden's Corner, which was the intersection of Groton and Oak Hill Roads. Both fires burned over several acres before they were put out. Sparks from a locomotive on the Nashua and Acton branch of the Boston and Maine started another fire the same afternoon near the residence of John Hall in West Graniteville, and burned over an acre of woodland owned by Fred Reed. The promptness of the men in responding to all of these fires is to be commended, for it was through their good work with the extinguisher that the fires were put out so quickly. A stranger of foreign extraction was seen acting in a suspicious manner nearby while the right fire was in progress, but before he could be questioned, he took an electric car bound for Ayer. On the arrival of the car there, however, he was placed under arrest and is now being held pending investigation. Somebody must have put a call in to the constable in Ayer. Next, we have the Ford's Village section. Mrs. Miles Collins is ill at the Lowell General Hospital, where she underwent an operation on Wednesday. Her daughter, Miss Violet, is in attendance. Miss Gladys Daly of Leominster has been spending the week with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hugh Daly, during the school vacation. Mr. and Mrs. William Burnett are visiting at the home of their daughter, Mrs. Ernest Longbottom of Arlington. Her given name was Emma Burnett. A little daughter, Evelyn L., arrived at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Edward Hyde of Ayer last Friday, April 21st. Mrs. Hyde, before her marriage, was Mrs. Eva Leclerc of this village. Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Mason and family of Lowell spent Sunday at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Catchpole. The ladies' sewing circle met in Recreation Hall on Wednesday afternoon. After the meeting, a dainty collation was served. The Girls' Friendly Society held their regular meeting on Wednesday evening, a large number being present. Members will be taken into the society on Sunday afternoon at St. Andrew's Mission. The cellar of a new house to be built by George E. Mountain is being dug on Story Street. The OM&B Club held a character party in Abbott Hall last week, Friday evening, which was very successful. Many people attended from Groton, Lowell, Graniteville, Littleton, and Westford. So far I've been unable to determine what OM&B mean in the club name. That's the news in Westford for the week ending April 29th, 1911. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of Westford CAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.